to talk about change, that's what it is. It's a new business model for the future. What's going to happen in the next 10 years? What's going to happen in the next 20 years? And how do you create the companies that could leave a positive legacy for our children, for our kids? And so that's what we're building. And, it's still consistent with that narrative of change.
Welcome to the Sports Backdrop, where we use sports as a backdrop for way bigger conversations. That includes discussing the latest trends and developments in the world of sports. I am your host, Eric Kazmov. This podcast exists because of the team at KazCM. KazCM is a B2B content production company helping organizations create and share their stories. We aim to create space where businesses can build assets and drive revenue through writing and talking. Content creation should be enjoyable and accessible. At KazCM, we love helping make that happen. Learn more at kazcm.com. So I heard a story. I was listening to some podcast that you had been featured in, and you had the story about when you went to work for free and you were just tagged along and you were shadowing. What was that? Because it's so funny this day and age, we all have to make money and it's important, right? We have bills to pay and all that kind of stuff. But when you have these bigger plans, right? I'm going to do whatever it takes. And this is my dream, or I think, and I'm going to go try it out. And if it means I have to work for free for a few minutes, I want to do that. But what was that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. That was basically, I was just such a fan of sneakers that I was like, I will work a weekend so that I can have a fresh pair of new shoes every single Monday at school. And so that was me as a 16-year-old though, right? So those were, just shows you your priorities, how they change. What I think is really special about that story about me working for free for sneakers is that I would have never imagined that years later, I would be the only Latino CEO to sell a footwear company to Foot Locker, that I would be creating the world's first circular bio-based footwear made in USA, historic monumental achievements and milestones through starting to work for free for sneakers at 16. So that is why that is so special to me, because it just shows you that. And I listened to one of your last podcasts with the tea company and, and she talked about just passion, right? Do something in your passion. I was so passionate about sneakers that I would work for free for them, right? In exchange for them. And now look, and I continued in my passion 30 years later and now changing the world through sneakers.
Yeah. There was this big push, especially when social media was getting going and all this content creation is what are you passionate about? Go do that. And then there's another side of things that say, that's great. You can be passionate about football, or you can be passionate about sneaker, whatever that thing might be. There has to be some practicality to it, perhaps. I don't know. There's two sides to everything. So when you hear that and you say, I'm not saying don't be passionate, or people aren't saying don't be passionate, but practically can it work out? But what do you hear when that comes out? Or is it no, screw that. You got a passion for it. You're going to figure something out. You just said, who would have thought that you'd become the first Latino CEO to sell the Foot Locker and all that? What comes to mind for you when I bring that up?
I think about that a lot. And I think it's also good to frame it, at least for myself, under the context if you're a founder, right? So if you're a startup founder and startups are so hard and you're going to literally get punched in the face, right? I think Elon Musk said something, it's like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. And so, you have literally no idea what's going to come your way. And Steve Jobs also said, it goes, in those times when you're passionate about something, you'll get up and you'll take the next step and go through it.
Yeah.
But when you're not, and you're not passionate about it, it is so easy just to drop it. And so I think that's the way I look at it, is that I've been through so many hardships in building companies and even building this company, what I'm going up against to change the world. And because I'm so passionate about it, because I would literally do it for free, is why I believe that I can achieve what I'm going to achieve. When it hits the fan and people are just going to bow out and say, you know what, this is just too much to me. For me, very similar to me, I'm just in love with what I do and passionate about it. So I continue.
Yeah.
And that's the gift. The gift is not the end result. There was an interview by Pharrell where he said, the gift is not the accolade, whether it be the accomplishment or the monetary compensation. The gift is that you get to wake up and do what you want every day.
Yeah.
And that is so special that I get to wake up, as someone who's been doing this for 30 years. And to me, it's almost like I get to play with sneakers, right?
Yeah.
And of
Yeah.
course, I'm building footwear for the largest workforces on the planet. But to me, it's still that very childlike, kind of inner passion of just, I love shoes, I love sneakers.
Yeah.
To me, that's just incredible.
How do you look past, like, you can listen to someone like Pharrell? It's like, well, yeah, that's easy and I get it. Like, cause he's got that new movie coming out with Legos and like
Yeah,
the creativity that's there and like hearing him talk about these things and you truly believe what he's saying. Like, a lot of famous people or
yeah,
celebrities or people who made millions, billions of dollars. Like, yeah, that's easy for you to say. Someone's over here trying to make it through the day and make it through the week and provide for their family and all that. And you go through the ups and downs as being a founder, entrepreneur. But how does someone look through that? And I guess that is where the passion comes out. I guess I keep like going down the same path, but it is interesting because in creativity, it's like we can have this podcast and I don't know how many people listen to it, right? Like we can have ideas of what that looks like. And does it
yeah,
matter? I mean, I look at it very differently because I've been doing this a long enough time to know like, wow, I get to talk to Sneaker Steve, right? Like I get to learn from you. I get to have this amazing conversation with someone I've never talked to before. And the podcast is a reason that like someone even reached out to us and the
yeah,
gratitude we have to say, wow, they want to talk to us. And yeah, it's going to help you out as well. I get it. But in this present moment, like we get to talk. How cool is that? You're in California, I'm in North Carolina. It's like, it's wild, like what we can do this day and age. And that's the beauty of it, I think. And then there's other things that can come from it. But sometimes we can all get lost into like, okay, how can I monetize this? How can I get a return on this? How can I do those things? And that's
yeah,
really, sometimes it's like hard to do. And I'm sure Pharrell even went through, he's like, this isn't going to work. Maybe you get to those lower moments, you start doubting yourself. Like, again, same question I asked before, like when I'm saying all that, what comes to mind?
yeah. I've been fortunate enough to be doing this long that I've seen the people on the come up,
Mm,
right? So I've got to meet Pharrell really early. I got to be around a lot of my peers when our offices were 100 square feet,
yeah.
you know, and now have hundreds of millions of dollars of business. And so at the core, those people, at least in the creative world, that creativity was still the same. And that creative spark that gave them that passion that was unique to them, that human gift of what they're bringing to the world, whether it be in fashion or in film or in music or in culinary, there was this passion or this gift that they gave to the world or whatever their superpower was.
Mm,
And I've seen that change and I've seen it go from us sitting down with friends who are just launching their careers and saying, wow, when I close my eyes, I dream of this. And then me 10 years later texting them like, I just saw your jet. Like,
yeah.
you have a plane with your name on it.
Yeah.
Like, what? Wow. Just these mind blown moments 10 years later. And you're like, whoa. And that is where, I look to that really about when I look at passion and I look about superpower, right? My superpower, I could have done many other careers. I've dibbled and dabbled into other careers. And my mother always told me, she goes, Steve, and she would tell me in Spanish, she would say, stick with the shoes, stick with the shoes.
Mm,
And ultimately, now I believe that with that passion, now I can actually change the world. And I believe my superpower is making footwear. And
yeah.
so I believe I can change the world. That is my vehicle for positive change. I can create footwear that is carbon negative, that can democratize comfort and allow the largest frontline workers in the country. It's 112 million Americans here that work on the frontline positions that don't
Yeah.
have access to high quality, comfortable footwear that's made sustainably, that's made in America. And I have the ability to do that and change the world
Yeah.
through this superpower, which is sneakers, and change people's lives. And so I think, that's my story, my perspective, right? The way I've seen it,
Sure.
can speak to, but, I'm happy to have this opportunity to share.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you see what happened in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Florida with the hurricanes, right? You talk about frontline workers. What happens basically an annual basis now in California with the fires and on, right? And that's on two sides of the country. But you also have what happens in many different places, and it's every day. And you having that passion to go from like sneakers, right? Which is like, I want to have the best kicks for school, and I want to show up, I don't want to look badass, right? All that kind of stuff. And now it's like, it's still what you put on your feet, and you show up and maybe with a different purpose and different cause behind it. And to take that to this level, yeah, man, it's like, it matters. That stuff makes a big difference. And I could see that saying, hey, this is something I want to do this. I want to throw my passion behind this. And that's what I'm guessing happened for you.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And I look at, what's happening at the weather. I look at the climate side, right? We are a sustainability driven foot tech company. And so I look at the natural disasters and what's happening in the world in terms of carbon emissions that are being put out into the environment, right? And I look at, well, how can I change that? And how can I do it at scale? And so that's one side of it. The other side of it, I look at it from a business side in terms of everything that's happening on supply chain.
Yeah.
Right? The disruption. Because of what's happening, you have now product that's taking longer to get. If you look at it, that in terms of being able to have that instability in supply chains and rising costs and inflation, people are now having to pay more for goods because now you have to import these goods and ports are being closed, whether they be for natural disasters or we just had the strikes. That was $5 billion a day of goods that weren't allowed to come into the country. And so I look at all of these issues and at the geopolitical issue, everything that's happening with wars, which is just causing the seas to be more turbulent, which then has container prices at a 4x. So containers now cost 4 times more. And what happens, that just gets passed down to the average American.
Right.
And I look at that, so I look at it from multiple angles when I look at what we're creating for the future.
Yeah.
And so on the climate side, I think, for us, for every single shoe, we plant a mangrove tree, which allows us by the first year to have a carbon negative product. And so the really incredible part of our business model is that because we can sell to the largest enterprises, you think of like a Starbucks or a McDonald's or an Amazon, these are the accounts that we want to sell to in the future. Imagine decarbonizing a workforce and removing over 1 million metric tons of CO2 by providing carbon negative footwear to the largest workforces, to every single warehouse worker, every logistic employee, every delivery driver. And so that to me is really special because you're starting to look at it in a completely different way. You look at the products that you create, how do you actually have a negative carbon effect on the environment by manufacturing in a new way using technology and innovation. And so that's, the difference between our company and others is the way that we look at creating products. So it's far beyond just a sneaker.
Yeah. Sustainability, which is a word that stood out to me when you had reached out, and you hear it a lot, right? It's like a buzzword. There's a lot of buzzwords you get in podcasting and media, and it's just nonstop, right? And it's funny, my son, when you go to college, you start taking all these core courses and whatever. And a course that's there's always the science and the languages and the English and the histories. It's like, well, sustainability is now a requirement at his university. Yeah. So you have to take a sustainability class. And that was like one of these projects he had to do. And he took it actually during the summer. So I was there when he was back home. And they were like, you buy products every day. And so you take one of those products and create something with it, do something with it. So it was like he got Chipotle and he took the Chipotle, the bottom of his burrito bowl, and turned it into a flower pot for his mom and gave his mom flowers on Mother's Day. And those actually flowers still exist with the pot today, right? Which is kind of cool when you think about it, because you hear, a lot of people and companies just using these buzzwords and it can get frustrating, right? And it's like, okay, well, no, this is something we can get behind because they're actually going out there and doing it. And there's a lot of confusion because you really, like what you just said, that's not day-to-day knowledge that people would have. You'd have to really research it and understand just that word sustainability. What does it mean? How can I help impact it? How can a company help impact it? I mean, my mom's side of my family, they grew up in, and so did a lot of other people. I'm from Buffalo, New York. They grew up in Niagara Falls. Well, Niagara Falls, the Love Canal and all sorts of problems. They were just dumping toxic chemicals into the water, creating problems for everybody. And so many people got cancer as a result. And there's been books written. And then you have other stories, like the Aaron Brockovich movie, right? And all that kind of stuff. Where these companies did not give a shit. and they're just doing whatever thing was best for them. And it's like, you don't know about it or see it until it's too late, right? It's tough, right? And you can go down many paths with that, but that you've been in the business, right? Like you've been shipping containers across the pond. You've been, you see who's making these sneakers and what does that mean? So we're getting into so many different aspects of what it is to manufacture this product to show up on your doorstep. Right now, we live in the age of Amazon. It's like I can order anything from Amazon. Most of the stuff's going to come where I live at the same day, if not within a day or two. And it's just boxes and boxes and boxes and stuff and more stuff and cars coming and going. It's like my dogs are going crazy because Amazon and UPS and all these companies are coming. It's like there's so much impact on everything that we're doing to say like, okay, now I got the sneakers, but what did that require to get there? Like you said, it like that is a deep thinking to get to your point. Did you see a lot of stuff throughout the time that say, man, I'm getting sick and tired of this. I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, exactly that. It was, how do I simplify that, right? Everything that you just said, how do I simplify that by editing and reducing to create the most efficient supply chain that I've seen built? And so I've lived, the difference between me and a lot of the CEOs is that I spent years in China. I learned how to speak Mandarin Chinese, so I can learn everything about manufacturing. And then I spent almost 10 years manufacturing in Europe. So I had to learn how to speak Italian so I could speak to the highest level supply chains in terms of the luxury market in the world. And so that unique lived experience showed me the juxtaposition between manufacturing in Asia and Europe. And really, I would say the catalyst for this company was the birth of my son. And so this company, Aless Gray, which is AGS Labs, Aless Gray Sustainable Labs, is named after my son. And it's really to leave a positive legacy in the world and change the way that manufacturing is done forever. And so I saw, when you look at companies that are producing, I want to make a shift in the industry to say, well, it's not really the consumer's fault for purchasing these goods. I rather point the blame back at the companies.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you'll hear, oh, millennials are buying from these companies. Gen Z doesn't care about sustainability because they keep buying this. Well, yeah, if you make stuff cheap and they can't get a job and they have no money, how are you as an adult or older than them going to blame them and be like, yeah, you 15-year-old, you 20-year-old, how dare you buy something cheap?
Right.
And I think that to me, the responsibility, I look at, I'm really inspired by Patagonia, and his passion for creating was, he said, I report to the planet. And for me, I look at it as that's a part of the way that I look at business, right? It's like, if I can create a business model that doesn't hurt people, that doesn't hurt animals, or doesn't hurt the planet, how incredible would that be?
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have this North Star or these non-negotiables, when you make decisions based off of that, and you start to look at every decision you make and saying, well, what is the impact? Like you said, those boxes that show up, those Amazon boxes, those UPS boxes. What if you think outside the box, like for us? What if you used biodegradable seaweed packaging, which are bringing together in our next product launch, which is part of some of the campaign that we did with Foot Locker. We're working with incredible eco-innovative companies that are focusing on the future of biodegradable packaging. And what if that packaging can then be compostable, right? And so I think it's really about the decisions of the company, and you have to understand the impact. Sometimes if the CEOs of the company or the executives or the decision makers haven't seen that impact straight away or don't care about it, right? Because not everyone's going to care about sustainability. Some people be like, I don't care. I just want something for cheap.
Right.
I'm just trying to, provide for my family. I'm just trying to put food on the table. I don't care about that stuff, right? And so what I love about our company is that we don't lead with sustainability. We're giving you the highest quality product at the most affordable price, the fastest.
Yeah.
Because this is a new business model that's made locally. And how great is it, the fact that that it's also a carbon negative product within its first year already?
Yeah.
Because we plant a tree for every single tree. And because we don't try to give you this big packaging to try to convince you or market to you to say, hey, look at this big, huge box that you're going to throw away in 10 seconds.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Why don't we invest that savings and actually put it into a better quality product that's going to last you longer so you can use it longer, which is the
Yeah.
key to sustainability, right? Is the
Yeah.
longevity of the product being on earth. And so it's just a completely different thinking that we brought to this market. And I'm excited that, retailers like REI just named us 9 companies changing the face of the outdoor industry. Our partnership with Nordstrom, bringing this to families that could shop, across the United Nations, and also with Amazon. And so, I'm just really excited that our story is resonating. And to your point, that they actually see the difference.
Yeah.
That's what I get back as most feedback is like, Steve, wow, this is actually really different than what I'm hearing from other companies. And that means a lot to us.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, like you just said with the REI, people have to access it. It's like, oh, cool story. I can't get my hands on it. I don't understand it. Where do I go? Right. So that
Yeah.
I would imagine that's the reason why, like, hey, you show up on a show like this, you have social media
Yeah.
posts. Like these things matter because it's like, hey, this is the story. This is the truth. And I want to share this. And I would love it to be in the stores at REI. And I could go in Charlotte and I can go to the REI store and I could buy your product. Right. Well, that's great. And that's important because you hear a lot about this stuff, but it's hard to get access to it. And I guess when you look at REI or you deal with Foot Locker, this relates to anything in business. Like, how are you forming these types of relationships? I mean, you've been in the industry for years, so you have connections, you have leverage, you have different things going on. How does the REI deal, for example, come together?
Yeah. Previously to this, I was the global director of DC Shoes, the action sports company, during $1 billion in sales growth. That changed my life forever, allowed me to meet the largest retailers in the world, but also build contacts and networks with other sales teams, distributors globally. And so through that, you build that not only the experience of being able to work at a company that scaled that much. So there's a lot of experience and learning that comes from that. And what to do and what not to do, right? Because it's not everything is good about growth, right? You learn what to do and what not to do. And then the other side of it is you just build this community within the business. And through there, and through this incredible agency in Vancouver called Monday Creative, and a trend reporting company, a woman by the name of Janine. She basically, who also lived in New York, and she heard our story, and she took our product at the outdoor retailer show. We were part of this section where it was like all the new brands. And, I just wanted to talk to her, and I was like, she picked our product to be like a trend forecasting part of the trade show. And I just told her our story. And she's like, you know what? You have to talk to REI. Like REI needs companies like yours. And so I was able to, it's not easy to get into REI. So,
Yeah, I imagine not.
I had to go through, meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, 5, 6, 7 meetings later, I'm there. I'm in Seattle. I'm at their corporate headquarters, ready to pitch for my life,
Yeah,
waiting to get a yes. And, I pitched with my full heart. And I
yeah,
pitched them and I told them, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. This is our story. And, they kind of were just like, I was waiting, 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 waiting. And halfway through, they were just like, all right, you're in. And I was
yeah.
like,
That's awesome.
and they're incredible partners.
Yeah,
They're the highest level, I would say. I work with a lot of retailers. They're the highest level in terms of technical functional products in the country, the largest outdoor retailer in the country, and then also I would say highest in terms of sustainability as well.
yeah. That's amazing. And I don't know, what if they say no?
Your heart just drops. You're
Yeah.
just like, because what happens is that then your thesis or your hypothesis is challenged, right?
Mm,
It's like, because what you're saying in these presentations, you're saying, hey, I deserve to be. And what that's saying is, I deserve to exist as a company in your ecosystem. And so this is great for other founders that are listening. The best way that I've gone about this is to just speak very, very clearly and easy to understand. And I just said, look, I am a customer of yours. I go in with my son and my wife to REI. And when I go buy and I look to buy products, I love that REI always has a sustainable lens. And we've created a product. We've done the data over the last 2 years, and here it is. And our shoes are made in less than 10 minutes with near zero water waste. We're one of the 3% of companies in the world using bio-based products. We're made locally so we can reduce carbon emissions. We've taken these savings to then actually have a higher quality product for you that you can have a great margin on, and so can we.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, we also plant a tree. So we've planted over 3,000 trees in partnership with REI already. And so I think that real difference is something that resonated with them. And I think after meeting, you can't BS someone like an REI or like a Nordstrom, right? They've heard it all.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to really present in a very clear and concise manner and have a very unique differentiation and value proposition of why your company should coexist and actually complements and enhances their overall assortment.
Yeah.
Because when they give you a purchase order, they're taking it from someone else, typically, right? So they might be able to grow the category, but somehow dollars get moved. And why should they move those dollars towards you and your impact?
Yeah. Yeah. If you think about it, like there's trades happen in sports. And so a team requires a new wide receiver. Well, chances are someone's moving out, someone's getting cut. And that's the reality of it. You have this purpose, right? You must have this confidence, right? Like obviously it's like, okay, I'm going to take a shot, throw on my Hail Mary. I'm doing whatever. I'm going to just put it all on the table.
Yeah.
My heart is just right here for you. But there's a confidence that comes with it to show like, yeah, I have the audacity to show up there and say like, this is good enough. And to build that confidence, right, that comes from a lot of different things. And you mentioned your mom before. And I think I saw pictures with, I believe that was your mom, correct me if I'm wrong, on your Instagram profile. Like obviously family, you've referenced your family multiple times in our short conversation so far.
Yes.
Her thoughts of stick with the shoes, Steve, right? That has a way of like staying, obviously it stayed with you. Is that where a lot of confidence comes from? Is it a combination of that plus a have to, or like what's in there to like, wow, I have this opportunity. Like I've done this before. Like I'll get on podcasts and I've done it, but wow, like you can get nervous before and you don't even realize you're like, why am I nervous? But nerves isn't necessarily like a lack of confidence. It's like, hey, you're putting yourself out there. So showing up to REI, sitting on that table with all these people, whatever that looks like, it's like, you don't know what's going to happen. The uncertainty of like, who's going to be there? And what if they don't show up? And what if they don't? And what if I don't know, I have something in my teeth? Like, I don't know. But where does that come from? And where is that,
Yeah, so I think if you ask me, it would probably be, I would say that I'm so prepared and that I'm ready and I'm passionate. But if you ask my wife, she would say it's because of your mom. And so my mom was a hustler. Like my mom, she was an immigrant. She worked 3 to 5 jobs. My house when I grew up was like a flea market. Like she would sell food. She would sell like little baby earrings. She would sell women's lingerie, anything to put food on the table and pay the rent.
Yeah.
And so even in her later years, she would take my business card and she would ask me to print 100 of them, give them to her. She would walk up to anyone, from like literally from a cook or a maintenance guy to a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, because we've been at events with Fortune 500 companies. And she'll just go right up to them. She goes, here it is. This is my son's card and this is what he does. And
I love it.
And I'm like, you know what? That is where I got it from. It's her.
Yeah.
I saw it as a kid,
That's amazing. Where did she immigrate from?
From Colombia.
Okay. Wow. I love that story. I mean, it's somewhere, right? And I think having whoever that person is, whether it's a family member or somebody else, and I'm sure you've had other people as well, that give you that confidence, that give you that whatever audacity, the word I used before, to like, no, man, this is really good. You should be proud of it. Because I think and I don't know if you had this early on, like imposter syndrome. Like you talk about meeting Pharrell and you've met other people, like celebrities, famous people. And some people can get starstruck. And maybe like once you meet enough famous people, or like they talk about, it's like fame's not real or whatever. But like at the beginning, it's probably hard. But as you talk to more, they're just people, right? But anyway, like when you get to that point and those things start happening, are you like, why am I here? Like, this is weird. Like, how did I get into this room? And how am I having this conversation with Pharrell right now? I don't know.
Yes, I think you start to build that up over time. So what happens is so say, for example, before REI, my dream was to be in Barney's, right? And then I accomplished that. And so being in Barney's or being in Selfridges around the world in the UK, once you start to accomplish these things, you start to create this level of, I would say, confidence, right? To your point where, and it's not confidence because you got to Barney's, it's confidence because your wildest dream was achieved,
Mm.
right? The biggest thing that you could say, I wish this can happen. You saw within your own timeline in your life that you said, okay, I did this and I did the work and I got to a yes.
Yeah.
And that just gives you like a sense of a coat of armor, right? Because when I step into it, even though I was as scared as I was pitching to REI, and I was confident because I did the work, I knew the data, I was really, I felt powerful about the product and what we're offering to the market because it was so different. But at the same time, I knew that I've been there before, right? I
Yeah.
knew that I've been at
Yeah.
where I'm looking up and just being like, oh my God, I wish I could be at REI, just like I wished I could be at Barney's. And then I think also by being around some of these people, whether it be enterprise leaders or just really great people, business or non business or celebrities, you learn a lot.
Yeah.
I graduated through the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator called Lacey. And so they brought me in a meeting at Arnold Schwarzenegger's office. And so we're meeting there with different startup founders, and the president of Lacey's there. And then 40 minutes into the meeting, they put a name card next to me and they kind of just drop his name, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. So we're in his office.
Yeah.
So we're in the governor's office, but we didn't know he was coming, right? Because we're talking about LA 2028 Olympics. The head of the committee was there. The senator who was responsible for bringing EV cars into the West Coast. Just
Wow.
mind-changing policy plus 5 startup founders. I was one of the startup founders. And the energy just shifts. The
Yeah.
second Arnold walks into the room, everyone's like, staff, everyone kind of just sits up, perks up. And so they sat him right next to me, like right here. And they're like, okay, Steve, pitch him.
What? Yeah.
Right there. No waiting, no nothing. And I had to be first because I was sitting next to him, right? So it just kind of like went in order. And so I pitched him. But I knew I kind of just, changed my body language. I just sat up and I was ready. And I was like, I'm getting ready to pitch in front of the Terminator. So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I better be strong.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And at the end, he goes, we got to say hasta la vista, baby, to plastic pollution. And, so,
That's
and
great.
I was like, yeah, that was great. We got to,
That's very,
that it's these moments they're really important.
yeah, that's a great story. And I like how he can make it fun, right? Like can bring it
Yeah.
down to that point, kind of like the point of I know what you think when you see me. I walk in this room and you're thinking Terminator and whatever, right? So that's very cool. Those yeses though, there's got to be no's in there.
Oh, so many.
You go through those and it's like, yeah, REI and Schwarzenegger and Barney's and all these things, those are boom, boom, boom. It's like, yeah, but there's a lot of misses in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons of no's. There's no's every day.
Yeah.
And so, there's a couple ways you could look at it, right? There's this great quote that for any of the listeners, they told me, this is the last grade. This is Grayson on the side.
I love it. Oh, there he is.
They said no to me 3 times. Barney's. It was on the 4th time that I presented that I got a yes.
Okay.
Right. So I think it's important for the listeners to know that this is what builds strength, right? Because I could have given up after 1.
Yeah.
And definitely not 2. And definitely on 3rd time's a charm, right?
Yeah.
3rd time's a charm, they also say no.
It's over.
You're
like,
yeah. You're like, that's it. It's like, it's 3rd time's a charm. Like, there's no 4th time.
Right.
No one uses the 4th time quote, right? So, but I kept going and I got it. And so there's a quote that says, no is not yet, sometimes in business.
Yeah.
And so as long as you know that you are willing to be vulnerable, honestly, and go back and say, hey, look, I have something for you. And you believe.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't believe, most people in my industry, this is also another great thing for people that are in the industry, not only the vulnerability of just getting the yes or no, imagine getting the yes or no after you're an executive, right? So I'm not someone who's brand new, a newbie, a rookie, getting told no to.
Yeah.
I'm a global executive that's getting told no to. When I get a no, it's a big no to me.
Yeah.
Right. And so to be and still have that vulnerability and that humility to be like, okay, they said no to me. What can I do to get to a yes
Yeah.
and not be discouraged. I think that's what's most beautiful about the Barney story for me was this, that we were looking at a less great product in the windows in Beverly Hills and Rodeo Drive. We saw our product in Tokyo at Barney's in Japan. And just seeing our product next to the highest level quality products in the world, it just, me kind of sitting there being like, they told me no 3 times and I didn't give up.
Yeah.
And look at it here in the windows in Beverly Hills and Rodeo Drive. We are in the window.
Yeah.
And so, I always give that feedback because I think people really need to understand, how difficult, how hard it is, what you go through as a founder. And, a lot of times you don't have the bandwidth to go through those 3 or 4 no's.
Yeah.
And so I think when you led with like that passion, my passion was higher than my ego.
Yeah. When do you stop chasing, right? And maybe in the Barney's one's not a great example because that's the dream.
Yeah.
So you don't stop chasing that.
Yeah.
But there's maybe people, prospects, clients, whoever that you're reaching out to and you're like, man, I'm done chasing them. They want it. They know where I am. They can call me, but you can't chase everybody. Like maybe you pick a certain few and you start running. Yeah. It's like a dog. It's like, oh, another squirrel. And then just off they go, but they see like, oh no, that's the one I want. So for Barney, it probably worked that way. Do you see that? Like, obviously, about like, okay, just stop chasing them. Stop going after them. What does that look like for you?
Yes, you coined it correctly. You can't chase everyone, right? Those are those ones that are life-changing.
Yeah.
Us being in REI, us, working with Nordstrom, these very, very big ones in my career. And so, I also believe that there's power in that, right? So you can offer something to a customer. If they don't see it, it's not the right time, then the way I look at it is that they will come back to us.
Yeah.
And I think that if you execute properly the business and the company, it's so interesting how people come back when you're winning. And so they'll come back like, hey, I really wanted to do this, but and I'm like, yeah, okay, and depending on if they were respectful during the process, you can take the business or not. But ultimately, I don't really put a lot of attention towards it when you do get that no. And I just look at it as if they said no, it wasn't the right timing for whatever reason. I'm a really big believer in that. It was just, it wasn't for whatever reason. Sometimes it's, you might have got that no to protect you. You have no idea. I'm a really just big believer in faith and that if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Especially if you know that you gave it your all, right? Like if you gave it your all and you still got that no. I received a no last year that I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like it was a last minute no. And we had worked so hard and we had put so much together. All the meetings were going great. And at the end of it turned into a no. And I was like, why?
Yeah.
And there was another quote that I read that said something about if they're not answering you, that is their answer. And so I was like, okay, move on.
Yeah.
Right. Don't try to just beat that.
Drive yourself crazy.
Exactly. Go towards the doors that are opening.
Yeah. Well, there could be, I heard this as well. We were working with a client and he told a story about he didn't make the football team and he was getting angry and he attributed it to race and he went home and he told his dad and he was complaining and his dad's like, don't get upset at the work you didn't do.
Yeah.
You didn't work for that. You didn't work to make the team. And so that hit him hard. And then he went to work and then he made the team. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe you could learn, like say, hey, you reached out, they're saying no, like maybe there's something like you say you gave it your all. Did you really?
Yeah.
Right. And there was Leslie Odom Jr. tells a story, actor. He was Aaron Burr in Hamilton or whatever. And he wanted to quit acting. So he called his uncle and he said, I want to sit down with you. I want to quit. He's like, okay, cool. He's like, before you do, like, just who'd you call today? I just want to know, like, who'd you call? He's like, what do you mean? I'm done. That's over. He's like, who'd you call? And so you go through that thing. You're like, you didn't actually do the things that you needed to do. And then once you've done that, then I guess you could look at yourself and say, yeah, now I've done everything. Okay, now I can make that decision clear and all that. Yeah, those things come to mind when you were talking about it. A few other things I want to go back real quick and go back like more at the beginning. I think I saw somewhere, where did you study in college?
Yeah, I started at a local community college in Queens called LaGuardia Community College. And then from there, I was really bad in high school. I was terrible. It took me almost 6 years to graduate high school. LaGuardia was the only school that accepted me.
Yeah.
And then I just, I think maybe because I was a little bit older, I flourished after that. And then I went to Vassar. So I got to spend some time upstate in Poughkeepsie.
Yeah.
Which was incredible. And then after that, I went to NYU. And so NYU at that time was my dream school, growing up in New York.
Wait, how old were you at Vassar and then NYU if it took you 6 years in high school?
Yeah, so I was going on my 6 year, so I was probably like 18,
Okay.
right? Probably like 18, because I think you graduated like 20, from like undergrad.
So like to go to Vassar is a good school. And they're all good colleges, right? Community college is a good college. So you kind of getting there, we get a lot of people who we talk to and people that listen, aspiring, going, could be in high school, could be in college, could be looking back at their college experience, right? Whatever, have children. Now, that's a big one. I mean, I deal with that constantly with kids of my own, that college experience and talking to people like yourself. So it's interesting because you said I was terrible in high school. Well, you just don't end up at NYU if you're terrible in high school. Like, again, you can make it through community college, but to get into NYU, for them to say the yes, you have to have some good grades. I know things have changed a lot over the years and now it's like college is just impossible, but right? Like what changed there?
Well, I think, when I was 14, my father died. And so I think those last 4 years was me just rebelling. And so I was with my mom in New York. So you imagine me in New York City in the 80s, during the epicenter of hip hop and crime, and just, it was a very unsafe place. And then not having a father figure, right, in your teenage years, which is so important in the development, especially under such a crazy environment in New York City in the 80s. And so I think, 80s, 90s was really, really tough in New York City. And I really just had, bad kids around me. And when you do that, you start to do stupid things as a teenager when you don't have, both parents there to like really look after you. My mom was just trying to literally keep the lights on and put food on the table. That's it. We're in survival mode.
Yeah.
And so it took me a little bit longer to graduate high school. But then, at LaGuardia, I was valedictorian. And then at NYU, I went to Stern School of Business for entrepreneurship. And then, to Vassar was through an incredible program. And then after that, recently last year, I was able to graduate through the Stanford GSB program and really go through, taking this company through scaling business program at Stanford. And that changed my life forever.
Yeah.
Being able to understand, how to apply these principles and be able to be, the next company that could be like 10, 100 million, $1 billion company.
Yeah.
But I always look at it as, when it comes to education, all of those steps are really hard. I didn't even own a computer coming into, when I wrote my NYU essay, I had to go and literally go into the library of the community college because I didn't even have the money to own a laptop or a computer. And so I would stay there till like 12 o'clock writing my applications. And what I was really, really proud of is that, I got into general admission. And so it was just really, I think what they saw was like this student that went from like high school to 4.0 to going to Vassar to being the valedictorian to not even having the tools or the financial capabilities and still making it in general admission into NYU. And so these accomplishments were very difficult. I've always had this thing in me where it's just like, if I feel it, I'm going to really, really go after it. I'm going to really do it. There's this difference between, John Assaroff always says, are you interested or are you committed? If you're interested, you'll find a way or an excuse out. But if you're committed, you will do it. And so I always look at that as something that's just very, very powerful. I was very, very committed to improving my education and really getting me out of poverty.
Yeah.
Right. Because where I came from and how I grew up, there was this burning desire to get me out of that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Your kids are going to grow up in a different environment, obviously, right? Like
I live in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
And you can't replace it, right? Like you can't. I've talked to a lot of parents who came from, let's say they came from nothing. Maybe their mom was whatever, and you can't put them in that situation. They can't experience the same thing you experience, but you can tell stories, right? Like what you're doing now. How do you get that kid to say, like, you don't have to study because you'll still have food. You can still go out and party tonight. You can still do these things. We're going to take care of you. We're not going to let you, be homeless or something like that. But like, how do they, it got to come from within, right? They have to get committed somehow, some way. And maybe they get there to a certain point, just like you had to get there to a certain point. It's not like it was there for you. Like you had to decide at some point, and the light goes on at different ages. You could be very young, you could be 40, 60 years old. I don't think it matters. You got to figure it out by this time. No, you just have to just keep working at it. And maybe it happens at a different times. Like, don't get lost in the time or the age or whatever that
Yeah.
might be. But how do you help people? I mean, it's a different world. You grew up in a different world, like you said, 80s and 90s in New York City is very different than 2024 Beverly Hills, but just in the world, 2024 today, the world and everything we're experiencing, social media, right? Like
Yeah.
travel is very different. Like, how do we manage this as parents?
Yeah. I think for me, it's really very, very foundational. A lot of communication. We definitely make sure that he understands the importance of a dollar. Nothing is just granted to him. Nothing is just given to him. I was raised with, and my wife was raised with a lot of those values, right? So he is not growing up with a silver spoon, right? He's growing up knowing that he has a lot. He has more than a lot of other kids out there. When I look at his school is incredible.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just about, I think, making sure that we keep him grounded, we keep him humble, but at the same time, and I discuss this a lot with the parents, is this thinking of, I grew up with lack, right? I grew up with scarcity mindset. I grew up scared and I grew up not having. And a lot of that is debilitating. And so why not give him the childhood that others had? And so he also grows up in abundance, and he grows up. Luckily, he has a lot of trees in his area and he has greenery and he has a beautiful environment where he can have this education. And I want to give him that privilege as well. And so I think that he's going to grow up in a way where, I can't control his destiny or where he goes to or where he evolves, but hopefully we can instill just really, really, strong core values that are important for any human to grow up, and being respectful and being kind. And so I think that's what the way that we're leaning into it is, really just at that core of those principles.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very well said. And it's funny because I was thinking back to some of the other things that I've heard you talk about, like MTV. And
Yeah.
I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, "Did you see the music video?" I'm like, "Yeah, but it's been a little while since I've seen a music video, right?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And times are changing. Now you can create your own music videos using AI, right? There's just all sorts of stuff that you can do with it. But at that time, so you got me thinking back in like the 80s and 90s. At that time, that was like a center of our universe, right? You would be by the TV, like waiting for like whatever song or video was coming out and what they were going to talk about, and the hip hop that changed everything, right?
Yes.
And then if you think about it, you're like, well, so many businesses, so many careers were created off of an MTV. Well, an MTV still
Yeah.
exists, but it doesn't exist like it did. And change is inevitable, right? Like your career's changed. So you're like Sneaker Steve, right? Like
Yeah.
sneakers, right? And now you're creating sustainable shoes for the front lines, for everybody, for comfort, because we're putting something on our feet and it's important, right? And like obviously that stuff's changing a lot. And so I don't know what the question is in there, but I do know that there's like the change is inevitable. The culture that you grew up in. I mean, sneaker culture is still huge, right? My daughter got into it and she's telling me stuff about sneakers that I grew up with and that she knows more about, and she's watching all these YouTube videos. And then we're going to these stores and we're finding these obscure stores in these interesting parts of town. And you're like, wait, how did we get here? And then she's having conversations and they're loving it. And she was like walking in like 10 years old. And I'm like, this is amazing. But like, how cool is that? Because
Yeah.
that interest, that commitment that she had, that knowledge, and the conversations that she'd have with her friends, and the content that's out there, there's just like so much to be interested in and then to potentially get committed to. But like, and then those interests change and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, you grew up in the epicenter of it to another level because you were there. Like, the skateboarding generation, and which again is in some regards back at something other thing that my daughter had interest in. And we're ending up at skate parks and having conversations with the people that are there. And it's fascinating is what it is. But there's a lot in all of it, but a lot of it's also changed to where you are today and where society is today. Where does that take you?
Yeah, I think the change is inevitable, right? And I think that, I grew up in that time in hip hop. I've always been about what's next. And I was able to forecast while I was at NYU and I would see all the skaters. And luckily, through some of the guys that the older kids that used to grow up in my building and skate while I played basketball ended up running Supreme. And so the guys who ran Supreme were happened to be just like the bigger guys on my block, right?
Yeah.
And so, and of course, everyone knows where Supreme turned into. And so when I went to NYU, I would see all these skaters and I would go see skate shops. And I was like, how come there's no skate shop? How come I can't buy these sneakers in Queens? And because that distribution didn't exist. And so that $1 billion of sales growth in 5 years came through that, through forecasting. What if we believe that skateboarding is going to go mass? And what if you're able to now have skateboarding and Vans inspired shoes, on the runways and at the best stores in the world? And what if you grew up in the hood? Should you be able to buy a pair of skateboard shoes too? And the answer is yes, you should be. Like, now when you see a kid wearing Vans or Lakai's, ES's or DC's, you're just like, oh yeah, whatever. He's just wearing, a pair of shoes, skate shoes, right?
Yeah.
That didn't exist back then. And so we created that distribution channel. And so now the way I look at it is that I believe that through new business models, the way that we look at the world now is I look at it like AGS Labs, Les Gray. I look at the business models of Tesla, the way that they were able to decentralize manufacturing. So instead of manufacturing everything in one country, decentralize it through technology, through molding. And so we mold our product and our shoes locally. So I'm able to have a product that can ship faster, that's made more efficiently, that's sustainably made here in America at a lower price. And so the way that I look at the change is exactly what we're doing in our business model, is that it has to change. Me now having a shoe into a different distribution channel, like what I did when I was at DC Shoes, or having our shows on MTV with Robin Big, that's not enough anymore. I believe the companies of the future are going to be manufactured locally. They're going to have the least amount of impact to the environment, and they're going to be digitally connected so that you're able to tap the shoe, have the data of the carbon emissions of that product, where the materials are made, so you actually know what went into making your shoe. And if you want to recycle it, you could do it at the touch of a button.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're bringing together with this shoe, which is the Frontline Pro 3, which is the first biocircular shoes made in USA.
Yeah.
For the frontline.
Wow.
This will be available for frontline workers for $34.
Wow.
It's never been done before.
Yeah.
And so to talk about change, that's what it is. It's a new business model for the future. What's going to happen in the next 10 years? What's going to happen in the next 20 years? And how do you create the companies that could leave a positive legacy for our children, for our kids' kids? And so that's what we're building. And, it's still consistent with that narrative of change.
Yeah. I hear, man. I love this. I mean, it's inspiring no matter what someone's working on. Like you said, like it doesn't have to just be the sneaker industry for, there's just so much in there. But regarding that, Les Gray, where do people learn about it? We'll put that out there. We'll obviously have your link in the show notes, but where do they learn about your company, what you're all about, and yourself?
Yeah, the easiest way is alesgray.com, ALESGREY.com, alesgray.com. And we say we want to make the world a less gray.
Yeah.
And that's why we call it a less gray.
I love it. And your son's name is?
Grayson Alessandro. So it's a less gray. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. Well, Steve, thank you for coming on here. The way you talk about things and that you go into the college, your experience and all that, I have 3 kids of my own. And I always think like, okay, if I get to have this conversation in some way, like it helps me, my family, and then hopefully other people listen and get something from it, that's enough for here. But I appreciate your time and all that you do. And your company was kind enough to send over. So we're going to order some shoes and wear it, tell people about it. So I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember I was in North Carolina when I was with DC. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed my time there and happy and grateful to be on the show, and to all the listeners as well. They can find me there or on LinkedIn as well under Steve Patino.
Sounds good. Thank you, man.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
This is a Quiet Loud Studios production, the podcast network where reflection meets amplification.